All right, we are live.
Good
Dude,
morning, everyone.
you got to do. There you go. Do the intro.
Good morning, good day. Hello, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. We are glad to be together again. We've been kind of touch and go for the last couple of weeks, and it's good to see Anton. And we're going to be talking about perception of stress. Remember to let us know where you're joining from, and of course, be sure and share your thoughts and questions in the comments so that we can engage and have some good discussion. So, Anton, you want to kind of dive into it with us?
Folks, as you know, stress is one of the biggest things that we focus on here, in Human SOS Show, because it's something that we see as a huge problem for society. It's really the root cause of many other symptoms, from mental health to performance drops to, people being irritable and walking around less happy than they used to be. So today we want to talk about how our perception of stress basically impacts our body's response. When I talk about this, I want to start with a comment that I always make, and I say that thoughts create chemicals, but
Mhm.
chemicals also create thoughts. And when we are perceiving stress in a certain way, our mind is creating certain thoughts, and those thoughts can actually either decrease or increase stress chemicals in our body. And when I was learning about stress many years ago, when going through all the health coaching things that I used to do, a coach of mine told me, Anton, the way that you perceive your environment is half the battle when it comes down to stress management.
Mm.
And it's not just perception, whether it's good or it's bad. And I'll give you guys an example of this. I was talking to a manager for a place that I work, and we were talking about burnout and how people were really struggling. And shout out to Suzette. Suzette, good morning, Suzette. Good to see you from St. Lucia. And I was talking to this manager, and he's saying people are burning out. And I've been kind of watching things. I was on this job for a couple months now, and what I noticed is these people, even though they were working as a team, they are kind of operating like they work in a factory, like on a conveyor belt, where they're doing separate tasks and they're never seeing the whole big picture. So why am I talking about this? Because they didn't see the fruits of their labor materialize in something greater than just a simple task that they were doing. Good morning, Lee. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. And for that reason, their perception of the extra work they were doing, because they're doing side projects on top of their normal jobs, it wasn't rewarding. Felt like, they didn't really see this great big outcome that connected them to why this work was worth it. And that's a big deal. And for that reason, we believe that, whenever you're doing anything, you want to connect it to the bigger picture. Kevin will talk to you about
Mm.
vision and things like that. What are your thoughts on that one, Kev?
Oh, definitely, because if we don't understand the bigger part of what we're doing, the bigger picture, we get so bogged down in just details, and it becomes discouraging because um, sometimes you get to a point where you are just going through the motions and without seeing the bigger picture or the end result, we become get to a point where we're bored or not challenged or don't understand the purpose or lose sight of the purpose. Even we may have learned the purpose and seen the vision before, but we get bogged down in just so much minutia that we, as the old saying goes, we can't see the forest for the trees. And so, yeah, that is an important part of how we react and again our perception, even when we're doing the same thing we were doing before.
Absolutely. I just shout out to Danilo from Providence and then Gladstone. Thanks so much for joining, folks. I was just talking about perception of stress, and connecting it to the bigger thing. The other thing that if you want to battle stress, and this is, folks, this is work stress, life stress, doesn't matter, is the concept of hope.
Mm.
When we have hope, when we think that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, when there is a peak after this valley that we're going through, the way that we're going to experience that moment, the way that our body, whether it be mentally or physiologically, going to experience that stress is going to be reduced comparing if we don't see hope, if we start feeling hopeless and there's never going to be an end in sight. So, one suggestion is just to rework what you're thinking, right? Reframe some of your thoughts. As I opened up, I said thoughts create chemicals, chemicals create thoughts, and vice versa. So the one thing that we control the most is not the chemicals, it's the thoughts. So sitting down and journaling things out is going to be an important task, right? Our perception is our reality. Absolutely, Lee. That's a great comment. Thank you so much for sharing. Sharon from New Jersey, thank you so much for joining. So, what are your thoughts on hope, Kev? Like, how can people try to find more hope in moments of stress in order to, shift their perception a little bit into a more positive standpoint?
Well, for me, the ultimate hope comes through my faith, because the ultimate hope for me is not about our time here on earth. Our ultimate hope is in, regardless of what happens in this physical life, we have an eternity to have hope in, and to not have to deal with the hurts and all of that. But yeah, hope has to be a part of what we're doing. In fact, if we lose hope, our stress levels just go out the roof, because everything at that point is a very negative, and causes us to get more discouraged, and it just becomes a vicious cycle. And so having a hope makes a difference. That's why I believe very much in the old saying of counting our blessings, because when we can focus on our worst day how we are blessed, then our worst day becomes not so bad, because we keep it in that perspective, and our perception changes. We go from a negative perception of everything to a positive perception, or more positive perception. If we're always very positive and never entertain or acknowledge negative thoughts or circumstances, I think we get into the danger of wearing rose-colored glasses, and that's not healthy either. But just recognizing what we have, who we are, and the blessings of those things help us maintain a hope, because of the, again, perception or perspective.
And it's interesting you bring up Christianity. We're both Christian. We're proud to say that. But it reminds me of my grandma. My grandma's been through a lot of tough life in many ways. Her husband was a 40-year alcoholic. She's lived in Russia for all her life and been through war, World War II. She's been through, Stalin. She's been through starvation, no food. I mean, she's been through collapse of Soviet Union. She lived until she was, I think, 86, if I remember correctly. And it just makes me think that's why she was so resilient, because she believed in better afterlife. She believed in something beyond here. Now, I also understand not every one of our listeners is necessarily a Christian, but it's the connection is the same. Believing that there's something better to come in the future is going to be a much easier way for you to deal with stress in the present. And to that point, Lee writes, are thoughts controllable? Well, it's kind of like Kevin just said, right? You may not be. There's kind of two different things. Where are those thoughts coming from? Is the first question I'm going to ask. Are those thoughts coming from more of our primitive brain that's focused on survival, that's focused on getting through a day, or is that thought coming from our logical, more advanced brain or prefrontal cortex that is going to be more focused on thriving versus just surviving? And what we can do is when we become present in the moment, as Kevin mentioned, and start to focus on gratitude, and we start to really name different things around us, whether it be something complex, like our relationships, our kids, or something as simple as just roof over our head. You start to become grounded and present. You start to shut off that emotionally driven limbic brain. And then maybe you don't control the thought fully, but you'll see them shifting towards a more positive direction. What are your thoughts on that, Kev?
Yeah, I don't know that our thoughts are controllable, because they're affected by lots of input and things like that. The key is transforming the thoughts that we deal with. And it's a practice that we are told to do on a daily basis, and that's being transformed by renewing our mind. And what does that mean? Is that uh, we are looking at a thought that comes in and say, okay, is this thought true? And we have to measure it against differing things. Some of it is past experiences. It has to do with the wisdom that we've gained to keep it in perspective. And then for us as faith believers and walking in faith, it is comparing it to what we know from the Bible and God's character, and so it's not that we control them necessarily, but we take. In fact, the Bible says we take them, and so it's we can't prevent them from coming. What we do with them is the difference, and gets into our back to our whole premise of perception. And so as we get thoughts that come in, we have ways to bring them into perspective by looking at our experience, our wisdom, and wisdom in other places. For example, in business world, we read some principles of business, and something comes in, and even somebody makes a comment or about what we're doing, and we compare it to what we know as a principle, a true principle, and go, okay, well, that's really not accurate. And so we transform that thought in light of what we know and what truth is, and so on.
It's interesting, and to continue Lee's question, can we control thoughts? We can't necessarily control them. We can influence them, and we can do all
Yeah,
the right things to try to influence them to be the best that we can. But the part that we don't talk about often is the chemical side of influencing our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very simple thing that I want you to do right now. I want you to put yourself in two different states. One state is maybe you're in financial difficulty, maybe work is just going really bad, maybe it's a combination of things. And what thoughts are you having then versus now you just came off vacation? You've just been relaxed on the beach somewhere by the palm trees, drinking Mai Tais if that's your thing. And just think about in those moments. A situation occurs, and that situation is stressful a little bit. What thoughts are going to happen between those two scenarios? Chances are, if you're like most of us, they're going to be very, very different thoughts. Now, I'm not telling you that you have to go on vacation every time to do this. You just have to learn how to dump this metaphorical water, which represents stress, out of your body, out of your capacity to hold it. Because when we're to the brim filled up with stress, our perception of the world changes, but also our thoughts change. And then that perception and those thoughts add more of that metaphorical water stress back into the bucket, and it gets into this really vicious cycle. We got some more comments here. I think this is Sharon. I've done this before. My faith is hope as well. I've been and now am in a lot of stressful situations. I try my best to somehow keep positive, and it's helped. There's a second part. And I'm dealing with health situation for my husband and myself. It's been hard, but I'm trying to be positive. And that's that's half the battle. Like we said, just the way that you're looking at it, the way you're perceiving it, having hope, believing that. I believe Sharon is a believer, if I remember correctly. Having faith that he's got you and it's going to be okay, whether it's now or later, then that's going to be definitely a good answer.
It is definitely matters, and that's why, although I don't force my faith on anyone because that's of no value, I certainly encourage people to consider the claims and consider the principles of faith, and because at the end of the day, it can make a remarkable difference in our perception in our life and how we deal with stress. And so I don't want to sound like a broken record, but there is such value there, and to ignore that would be, I think, unfair and uncaring. And I wanted to jump on your comment about how we perceive things when we come back from vacation, part of what we do with vacation is a stress realignment. And because we adjust our priorities, and generally, hopefully, on vacation, we have our priorities more in line with what we really need them to be. So the idea should be is as we align our priorities and we look at work-life congruence, then we shouldn't get to a point that a vacation is such a remarkable shift in our life that it's like two different things completely. That if that's the case, it tells us we've got some priority concerns and we've got some stress concerns that we need to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Whereas if we are perceiving well, we are managing our stress well, then when we go on vacation, yeah, it's going to be some different, but it shouldn't be such a shock to the system because we are functioning, to use again a faith term, we're functioning in abundance on a regular basis rather than only functioning abundantly when we're on vacation or something like that. So just help us to realize where we are and where our perceptions are by our response just on when we go on vacation. If it's such a different world, that's a good sign of a bad sign.
Absolutely. We have a comment from Suzette. Stress is an offspring of fear from negative thoughts. We are not seeing a way out because we are concentrating on short-term needs, not long-term vision. Absolutely.
Well
If we're
put.
focused on that long-term vision, we're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to see our struggle, whatever it may be, connected to a greater purpose and to a greater outcome, and things become worth it. Otherwise, it feels hopeless. Otherwise, it feels like, why even bother? Why go on? Why keep pushing? Why keep stressing?
Interesting. I was looking at Lee's comment about doing a poll yesterday. I would love to see that poll when I get back where I can look that up, Lee. I will be interesting to see what the responses are because I know LinkedIn is such a diverse audience and so on. So a good question. I wish I'd thought of that.
I mean, it's Bible's full of inspiration because Bible's full of hope. Bible's full of having us reach for a better version of ourselves, and which is to me is a great form of inspiration. It's not just saying come as you are. I mean, it does, but it also says still try to be better for others, be an example, I really like the combination of things will be better, but you can also make it better right now. And there's so many verses there that it's a great poll, Lee, for sure. And then he's got another comment, says, I feed my brain positive material. Would it not affect my thoughts? Similarly, if I feed my brain toxic material, would it not create negative and destructive thoughts? Absolutely. And this is where I'm kind of saying we can influence our thoughts, right? These kind of things, they influence them. I think there's circumstantial things that happen that affect our perception of things that may not always depend on just us. And when me and Kev talk about controlling something, it's something that we can directly say yes or no to. It's a decision, it's an action that's 100% controlled by only us. Unfortunately, our thoughts, unless we're, you know what? I think there's people in the world who probably have this down to, so good they can block out their brain and really just focus on themselves. I haven't met one yet. They may be around, but our environment's still gonna have an impact. And for that reason, I use the word influence.
Well, and Lee hits on a very important principle. For so long, and it's still around. It's not as pervasive as it was. We were told, "Oh, you've got to keep an open mind." Well, I get the concept to a degree, but if we leave the doors of our mind open and let everything come in, we're going to have a real problem. And so, what Lee is talking about is keeping watch over your thoughts and your inputs. I mean, in some regards, your brain is like a computer. If you take a computer and feed it bad files and wrong information, you're going to get bad information out, garbage in, garbage out. Same way with our minds. If we're always exposing ourselves to um, negative and to fearful and to um, hopelessness and things like that, darkness, we're going to be affected by it. That is such a key principle. And so, yes, Lee, you're right. We have to guard our mind and our thoughts, not to the extent of being um, ignorant or uh, simple-minded. But yes, that's an important principle that a lot of people miss. Another example of that is people come around in a social or work environment and start gossiping. Gossip is such a poison that we should immediately go, no, don't. I'm not part of the problem. I'm not part of the solution. So I don't need to know. It's not something that is valuable for me to know, and therefore I shouldn't be listening or allowing this input. And in fact, I have to pick on us as Christians in that we gossip, do spiritual gossip, saying, "Well, you need to pray for this person because this and this." No, don't go there. Tell me to pray for them. Don't give me details and stuff that I don't need to know, because again, that poisons my perspective. So
Absolutely. And the other point is, it's not just, when he says material is people around us. They talks about you're the average of 5 people that you surround yourself with. And that's very true. So if we surround ourselves with very negative, toxic people, we're going to end up having negative, toxic mindset, negative, toxic perception. And the other thing that it made me think of is the concept of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to rewire itself, whether it be for good or for bad. It's going to always do that. Even into our later years, doesn't matter how old you are, your brain continues to make new connection or break down old ones and shift and change. And what we feed our brain, as kind of Lee said, is going to determine, is it wired positively? Is it wired negatively? And coming back to perception, that is going to interpret. So that positive or negative wiring could be the same environment, but the way the brain is reading it is completely different based on the perception that it's creating due to the wiring that it has. So constantly trying to feed it positive material is absolutely true.
it's really ironic that think neuroplasticity is a new concept. It's a new term and scientific word for a very old concept. Again, going back to the Bible, renewing our mind. It is a principle that we were given 2,000 plus years ago, that we already have that principle. Now we've got scientific evidence to support it. Now we have to make the effort to use it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. From Sharon, for me, there is a quote in the Bible that says, "If ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, nothing shall be impossible unto thee." That has and is helping me to get through all of the stress. That's a wonderful quote, Sharon. Thank you so much for sharing. That's so true.
Well, and what's really cool is had explained to me at one time. Have you ever seen what the size of a mustard seed?
Nah.
It has to be one of the tiniest seeds there is. So
Oh, really?
it doesn't even require big effort if we learn the principles and apply it. It's the smallest seed out there, and yet it goes to great power.
Well said. And then another one that Lee said, the music, books, and movies that come into our lives affect our thoughts and action. The advertising industry knows it well.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's not just advertising. It's the enemy. It's, everybody knows it well. And that's the way that it happens. I was listening to service yesterday, and it talked about how the Lord uses people, but the enemy uses people too. And those people infect our mind with wrong thinking, with wrong way of perceiving things. And, that's how he gets to us.
Yeah, that's again, Lee, you're right, going down a great path on understanding the back to perceptions, because if our perceptions of, and particularly about stress, are such, then that are such that allows the stress to continue unmanaged, unfettered, then we are in trouble. And, Anton can tell you that not just the mental emotional effects, but the physiological effects that all of this has on us. And it will quickly spiral downward. And that's what people are still missing, I'm afraid, in what we do from a work standpoint and all that. So yes, music, books, and even among that list, realize not all music is good for you. Not all books are good for you, or not all movies. Just because it's pretend or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean we should expose ourselves to it because of the potential impact.
Absolutely. And, so coming back into what can we do, right? What can we do to get better? I already mentioned it already. We want to make sure that the perception that we have is the reality that's in front of us. It's not just what our mind is creating. I call it our monkey brain. It's that primitive side that just plays tricks on us because it's so fear based. And we try to bring logic into it. We try to bring gratitude into it. And me and Kevin talk about this exercise a lot. A lot of times when we feel like we're losing control, right? Our mind is overwhelmed. There's so many thoughts flying through at 1,000,000 miles per hour. Just to slow it down through journaling. And we talk about using 3 buckets, right? Bucket one is things that directly control. Sit down and write down all the thoughts that are happening in your mind right now about things you directly control. And then write down, did you do what you needed to do there? If not, make a to-do list. When it's time to do that, you will get to it. The second bucket is things that you influence. These are things that are outside of your direct control, usually involving other people, because we can do all the right things, but ultimately it's going to boil down to a human choice to do what we influence them to do or not, right? We can try to teach our kids all the things that we want to be good kids, but eventually they're going to make that decision. Going back to Christianity, we can be evangelical, we can preach the Lord's word, we can show and live by example, but ultimately it's going to be their choice to walk into that faith. So when we write those thoughts down, we write down, did we again do all the things that we could do to influence the right outcomes? And if you say yes, this is where the practice of letting go has to come in. You have to say, I've done everything I can. I've gotten it to a point where I can do as much as I can. And now I have to stop worrying about it. I have to stop letting it overburden my mind so I can focus on other things that I can control, other things that I can influence. And the last bucket is things that we don't control at all. We don't have anything to do with the weather, the politics, the way of most things in the world. Majority of things we actually don't control. So if you sit down and you do that, you realize that so many things in your brain are full of stuff that you have nothing to do with, but yet it's plaguing your mind. It's creating those negative wirings. It's impacting your perception negatively and ultimately causing more stress than you should be having when we already live in an overburdened, stressed out world.
Yeah, and our choice with the third bucket, there's different ways to look at it. One is to empty it out and let go of it. Let it go do whatever it's going to do. Or the way I like to look at it is that bucket I hand over to God. Say, God, I can't control it, I can't influence it. So this is your baby or your concern, not mine. And just let go. And the nice thing about it is, as we understand God's character, he'll take care of it and help it to be the best thing for us ultimately. And that's, again, the value of faith. And Jane makes a comment that I think is really good. It says we should pay as much attention to what we put in our minds as we do what we put into our, I think she meant to put body there. And because we've learned to focus a bit on, for example, we wouldn't knowingly take poison. We wouldn't eat poisonous food or whatever, yet quite often we let poison into our minds. We let that come into us without even checking, not realizing that can be as damaging or even more damaging potentially than what we do physically. So definitely important part there.
And this is why health is one of the categories that we have at Perspective Force, which is the company that brings you guys Human SOS shows that me and Kevin have. It's because what we are has to do with what we put into our bodies. And I told you,
Mm.
chemicals create thoughts. So if you're constantly putting bad food into your body that has bad
Mm-hmm.
chemicals in it, or if you're abusing sugars and doing too many of those things, it's the same thing as having a stressful person yelling into your ear all the time. It's creating the same stress on your body that then changes your perception of everything, changes the way your body responds to everything, and changes those chemicals that then create the bad thoughts. And once again, we're in that very vicious cycle. You know, she also talks about the Travis Scott concert showed what kind of poison people are allowing into their minds. Total loss of control until something bad happens. If you're not familiar, folks, it's where, you know, I think it's the right one I'm thinking of, where a bunch of people were trampled and, you know, nobody stopped the concert while people were dying, and it was just a really, really bad situation. I heard that there was rumors of, you know, satanic involvement of some sort and worshiping the devil, and, you know, just crazy, crazy stuff. And, you know, we really have to start paying attention as parents what we're feeding our kids, and, you know, what kind of things are going into their minds, because this is a person that is very popular with kids these days, younger generation, and stuff like that. Did you hear about this at all, Kev?
Yes, I did. I haven't heard the outcomes, partly because, and I'll have to jump on a concept here, is I don't watch lot of news because right now in our culture, I think that's one of the biggest poisons that we allow into our minds is all of the detail and things like that. But yes, it sounds very unfortunate how things were handled. And I even have to question, even if the physical outcomes hadn't happened the way they did, I have to wonder what's going on from a mental emotional input standpoint if the first bad choice was being present at the concert to start with. But yeah, it's those kinds of things that evidence to us the state that our culture has gotten into, and and it definitely is something to continue to be aware of. And I'll have to go to a challenge that I issue wisdom seekers back in January. Disconnect, get away from stuff, and then observe, and then seek wisdom on it. That way, we begin to filter. That's a way of filtering what we're putting in and allowing to control us. It's that bucket process, but we got to be mindful and make a choice to make that part of what we do.
Absolutely. Daniela has a great comment. Thinking about all the positive things in my life always win over stress and negative thinking. Negative thoughts are a simple um, tactic, I'm assuming, of evil trying to bring us down and stop us from winning.
Mm,
100%. You know, I've said this many years ago. Gratitude is one of the greatest antidotes to stress. When we're grateful, when we feel blessed, you know, we're full of hope. We're full of bright horizons. We're full of, you know, being connected to our vision and all those kind of things. Suzette said, I give it to God, but I continue working on strengthening my resolve. Absolutely. You know, we got to put in the work, but at the same time, we surrender to his will, and that helps in the way too. You know, it's surrender is actually one of the most common things between different religions. If you take a look, and I've studied different religions in my time, especially being a yoga teacher and meditation coach, most religions have some form of concept of surrendering to a greater power.
mm.
Whatever people believe, you know, it's an important concept. Trying to control everything coming back. Look at we talked about the three buckets. It's teaching us to surrender a lot of things. It's
Mm.
to your points is that, you know, it's still control what you can control, influence what you can. But majority of that stuff you have nothing to do with. Surrender to his will or surrender to your journal, whatever it may be.
Welcome, Zaid. Glad to have you. Zaid's one of our regulars. Good to hear from you.
Let's see. Jane said, we have to stop worrying and living in fear and start living the way the Bible tells us to. I thankfully do not own a TV, but I read about the Travis Scott incident because I am so interested in understanding why people flock to someone like him. How can we help these young people see a more positive way? Yes. Just you're talking about the battle against pop culture, against, you know, celebrity and unfortunate. the issue is the more obscene, the more absurd, the more loud that a person is. Talk about Kanye West, talk about Kim Kardashians, talk about Travis Scott's. The more publicity they get, the more publicity they get, the more followers they get, the more they seem like they're the right answer, and make people see that, oh, I should follow them because they're popular. They have all this attention. And I do my best by just leading my kids by example, and showing them I don't pay attention to that stuff. I don't know most of these celebrities. I don't know their news. To your point, I don't watch all this entertainment stuff. And when I ask them, who's your hero, and they tell me one of these people, and I say, why? What are they doing that makes be your hero? What are they doing to influence you in a positive way? And guess what? Then I show them somebody that can be their hero, right? I show them an athlete very often. That's for me. I come from sports. I show them an athlete that's competing on a national level, but she's also a mother. She's a positive influence in her circle. Alex Morgan's one of them. We have soccer is a big part of our lives. So for my daughter, that's who I try to, make her follow. And then I show her, this is why you do this. This is why this should be your hero. They are still popular, maybe not on the level that they are. They're not in publicity news because it's not this edgy stuff that everybody wants to talk about. But try to replace the stimulus. Try to replace that with a positive one versus a negative one.
Three concepts. One, you hit on it, Anton, role modeling. The power of leadership, which, by the way, we're all leaders of ourselves, and we are leaders of others if we're a parent, aunt, uncle, grandparent, whatever. And then the role modeling is so powerful. And that doesn't mean that we have to get crazy or do dumb things, but role modeling means sometimes offering an alternative. Second is parenting, what you just talked about, Anton. Part of the problem we have today is parents aren't parenting. Okay, that's part of my beef about education. Right now, current education system's primary parent to most of the young people. And as a result, the influence over them and what is priority is their peers. And so we've got immature peers setting the example for other immature peers and vice versa. And so that is such a problem for us in our current culture. And then the last thing is character. We do not in our culture value building character, rather making people feel good. And character ultimately helps us feel good, quote unquote, but character keeps us from having to feel the need to fit in to everything and anything. And when we have character, we begin to let our character represent us and set us apart rather than doing crazy stuff. And just it is, I watch so many young people starved for standing out and being unique, and they're doing it with very dangerous and hurtful things in their life. And so again, role modeling, parenting, and character. If you deal with a lot of those things, you head off a lot of the problems we're seeing with young people and how they're harming themselves through this culture and all those pieces.
And I always like to bring everything back to the topic that we're starting with perception of stress. And think about this, right? Think about your child looking up at one of these terrible example celebrities that we just mentioned, right? And they look at it and they say, they're great people because of the things they have. They're great people because of all these crazy things they do. I can never be that. I can't have that level of fame. I can't have that kind of money. Versus you go and you teach them to have a role model that is just action based, somebody that just takes good actions and leads by example. Guess what they can do? They can say, I can be that. I can do that. And I'm going to throw this out here just as a thought for everybody, but Matthew McConaughey is an interesting human being. He's a little out there, but he does, get a few things right once in a while. I read his new book. And he gave an Oscar speech a long time ago that really resonated with me. And when Suzette wrote, you gave me an idea for a post, who's your hero? Well, he taught me for my hero to be me 10 years from now, a better version of myself. It's something that I can strive, I can always reach to, but I'm never there. I'm always trying to get to that next level of being better. And that's what I want to teach my kids. I'm like, go be your own hero. Go take the right actions. Go take the right things that make you proud of who you are, and then keep strive to reaching better. And it just helps us to compete against ourselves versus uncontrollables, and having this perception that we can never be these things that we idolize.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a practical tip. It goes a long way. Okay, I'm a little further down the road than many of you, so I've had to go walk through this with 5 children. Now I'm practicing again with 5 grandchildren. But you look at celebrity, even sports celebrity, any kind of celebrity. Look at where a lot of the celebrities end up. Let your children show them. Be purposeful to find out, okay, where is this celebrity now? What's going on with them? And show them the realities of those choices, the consequences, so that they can then go, hey, it looks glamorous now, but this one died at an unusually early age, or this one is now penniless, destitute, and miserable. And look at what the end results are, and probably 90+% of the time, the end result doesn't look good if you evaluate it. Or these people later will come to find out they had done it wrong, and they'll renounce and change and go a different direction. But let your young people see what celebrity does. If they really get into that and say, okay, let's don't tell them what to think, but give them information to lead them towards coming to conclusions that are wise. And the more we do that, the more likely we are to have heroes that are not zeros.
That's a good way of saying it. Well, folks, we're gonna wrap this up. Kevin's got his event. I gotta go get my kids ready for the day. But thank you so much for joining. I always like to remind you that if it wasn't for you showing up, engaging with us, talking with us, me and Kevin would probably quit a long time ago, because we wouldn't see a connection to something better. We wouldn't see a connection to our community. We wouldn't see a connection to us making an impact. It's stressful to come out there, 85 times for 85 weeks and keep showing up over and over and jumping through hoops like Kevin has many times. Do it yesterday or last week, but he did it on his own last minute. But it's because of you that we show up. And the only thing that I ask is that you become a little evangelical for us, and you help to share about Human SOS. You help to invite people here, and we can create a greater conversation around, really managing stress, but really bringing the human beings into human resources and prioritizing human beings in society.
Yeah, it's you guys are our inspiration to be here. Like Anton said, we've been at this 85 episodes, and that would have stopped at what much earlier episode had we not had you to inspire us. So thank you for that. Encourage you to bring others and be a part of the movement. It's not about us. It's about trying to bring human back into life and in the workforce and the workplace, so that we can approach it differently and not be ultimately end up a hero that's a zero for the people around us. So thanks, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you guys next week, same time, and we can maybe do something leading up to Thanksgiving.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone.